Katie, for the introduction. It's true, so I'm about to go through my own downsizing experiment. So I will have to live out my philosophy of living with less. So my name is Marin. I'm here to talk about breaking up with your clutter in order to have a healthier lifestyle. And it's a small group, so I'd like to welcome you to comment or ask questions throughout, although I will reserve some time at the end for questions as well. I want to start with a simple question. What is clutter? Does anybody have examples of clutter? You could just yell them out. What was that?
I said classroom 311.
Classroom 311, okay. Anybody else? Well, I work with people with all kinds of clutter. So sometimes it's clothing and shoes and hats and bags and belts and accessories, and other times it's books. Most of the time it's paper. Sometimes it's children's toys or other paraphernalia that comes with parenthood. Sometimes it's garage clutter, all those tools and bicycles and all that equipment that comes out maybe once a year, maybe not at all, that gets stacked up there. A lot of times it's attic clutter, stuff like holiday decorations or old photographs and memorabilia. Is any of this sounding familiar? Yeah? Does anybody have one or more categories of this clutter in their house? Just about everybody? Yeah? Well, I would like to talk about clutter in a little bit of a different way. Certainly, clutter can be physical, and it often is. But often the physical clutter is an indication, or at least a side effect, of some of the other clutter that can be in our lives. And we hear about mental clutter, right? Too many ideas going on, too many things happening in our brains all at once that it makes it hard to focus. But what I'm talking about today is the clutter that can happen when you have too many commitments, or you're committed to sometimes the wrong things. So here I've talked about, the stacks of paper, the scattered toys in our homes as being the physical clutter, but draining relationships, attitudes, and activities can also be clutter. And sometimes, and I see this with a lot of my clients who really hire me to help them with the physical clutter in their homes and end up finding that it's really about a lot more than that. Those sorts of cluttered activities and commitments can result in negative or harmful activities such as binge TV watching, binge eating, other unhealthy things that help us to forget about the stuff that maybe we're a little scared to focus on. So I'm really here to talk about conscious choices. And when I meet my clients for the first time, or when I talk to groups like this, I like to point out that when people hire me, they think that we're there to talk about stuff. And the truth is that decluttering your house is really about prioritizing. And I find that a lot of people work on helping people self-improve, helping people be happier, more productive, more peaceful. And we're all kind of getting at it from different angles. Mine happens to be through the stuff angle. But we're all talking about making smart priorities for ourselves and making conscious decisions that support those priorities. So whatever the clutter in your life, overcoming it means taking control of your decision making. So what happens when we have cluttered houses, because that's always the really easy example, right? When we have too much stuff, is we're doing two things without really thinking hard about them. One is we're shopping. We're shopping when we're bored. We're shopping to make ourselves feel better. We're shopping because there's something else we should be doing, but we're afraid or nervous about doing that, so this fills the time. We're shopping because our kids are asking us to, or because we feel that our peers expect us to. And we're shopping and we're gathering all of these things into our homes that we don't need, that sometimes we have many duplicates of. And those things that were originally supposed to improve our lives, to make us more efficient and happier and free us up for, other things to enjoy end up sucking up a lot of our space, our time, our energy, and of course our money if we're really talking about shopping. But it's not just shopping, right? It's about going to conferences and picking up a bunch of free stuff that you're handed, and it's about your kids coming home with artwork and papers and little free doohickeys that they're picking up throughout the day, and we're getting all this stuff into our houses. The other thing we're doing, without really consciously thinking about it, is that we're then hoarding that stuff. We're keeping it. Now, I'm asked if I work with hoarders, and I think what people mean when they ask me that is, do I work with extreme hoarders, such as the people that you see on those TV shows, where they've got animals living unbeknownst to them in their apartments and they can't get to their bed. And I have worked with a couple of those people. But my observation is that we all have a little bit of a hoarding tendency. And so when we go out and we acquire things that we don't need, whether it's because we're at a store, because we're accepting gifts or free items from other people without stopping and saying, you know what, I don't really need that, no thank you. We're also then keeping those things in our lives, even though there's a sneaking feeling inside that we should not. And so that behavior becomes a further hoarding behavior, and that's how the clutter gets stuck. So even though we know we should be going through these things and going, you know what, I've got those boxes of old yearbooks or photographs or checkbooks that when my parents died, I picked this up from their estate, and I've got checkbooks from the last 40 years that were my parents. Even though we know we should just take those out and get rid of them and free up the space and declutter and let them go, it's hard to do it because these are emotional decisions. And so what do? We just don't think about it. We just make those shopping decisions without really thinking them through, and we make those keeping decisions without really thinking them through. And then we ask, why do I feel overwhelmed? Why do I feel unfocused? Why do I feel that my life is cluttered? And when our space is cluttered, sometimes it means that we're not making conscious decisions in other areas of our life, such as those involving our health, our family relationships, our careers, our personal growth, our friendships, and other relationships. So decluttering requires several things, and the first one is what I just mentioned, is defining priorities. So before I start digging through somebody's kitchen or closet or attic, when I start working with them, my first question is to sit down and say, you know what is really important to you in your life right now? Not what was important when you were a child or what was important 10 years ago or what may be important 20 years from now, but today, what should you be focusing on? What are your 1 to 3 or maybe 5 biggest priorities in life? And I bet if I asked the audience today, you'd say things that are very common to most of us. Is there anybody here, if I asked you top 3 to 5 priorities in your life, who would say laundry? No one? Oh, no. Get out of here. Who would say owning a lot of stuff? Who would say spending every weekend maintaining the yard? Nobody, right? And yet those things end up on our priority list, right? If we actually look at the time and energy that we're spending on a daily or weekly or monthly basis, a lot of the activities that we're doing are things that do not directly support our main life priorities, which are family, health, career sometimes. What else? Anybody? Church or faith. What about, personal growth, things like travel or your hobbies or reading or, whatever those sorts of things are. Those are usually the answers that I get, right? And they're the answers that I would give when answering that question. And yet we spend so much of our resources spending time on other things that don't support those things. So defining your priorities is the first step, because the idea when you set up your space and you set up your life is that everything you do should be supporting what you want out of your life right now. There's only so much space in our homes, energy in us, certainly only so much time in our day and in our lives. And so we want to be dedicating them to those main priorities. As much as we all have to do laundry sometimes and pay our taxes and mow our lawns, of course we have to do that. But sometimes we put those items ahead of the things that we're really trying to accomplish. We also have to identify the emotional barriers that are getting in the way of decluttering in order to declutter. And then we have to confront those barriers and try to overcome them. And so what I spend a lot of time talking to people about when I'm decluttering their spaces, decluttering their lives, is, what are the thoughts that are going through your head when you're shopping and you feel compelled to take this home with you? Are you thinking, is it automatic, or are there other thoughts about, well, it's just cute and I have this, I've been having a bad day and this will make me feel better? What are the emotional barriers to letting go of not just the stuff in the attic, but the relationships that may be draining you, the commitments that you've made that really aren't your thing? I think we all have commitments like, maybe to our churches or to our hobbies or certainly to our children. But then we have other ones that maybe we just say yes to. And why? Because we feel guilty, because we feel pressure, because we feel a need to impress, because we feel we can't say no, because we don't know how to say no. And these are all things that we need to identify in ourselves before we can possibly change the behavior. Decluttering also will require saying no to the clutter, whether it's physical or existential, in order to say yes to the important things. So what I hear from a lot of people when they are having reluctant feelings about letting go of an object or a commitment, like I was recently working with a woman who has a friend who calls her every morning at 7 a.m. to tell her all about her problems for about 2 hours on the phone. And believe it or not, this woman did not want to be doing that at 7 a.m. She's recently retired. She says she doesn't want to get out of bed until at least 9, and then she wants to watch Good Morning America or something by herself and drink her coffee. And she does not want to talk to this friend for 2 hours or listen to this friend for 2 hours every morning. That relationship she was finding incredibly draining. And she was starting her every day with an experience that made her unhappy, and she felt taken advantage of and walked over, and she felt powerless to change it. So in order to say yes to the important things, right, those top 3 priorities, the really good, healthy relationships in our lives, the exercise programs that we care about, the other things that we do to take care of our health, we have to say no to the things that get in the way. Letting go of something is not always a loss. It is usually a gain. If you're letting go of the things that don't serve you, you're actually not losing anything. You are gaining time, energy, sometimes money, a lot of times space. You are gaining something back. And finally, decluttering requires changing our attitudes, which then leads to changed behaviors. And so whether it's decluttering our physical space or decluttering those relationships or activities or those unhealthy activities that we fall into, like watching too much TV or skipping the run in this morning or eating the whole bag of potato chips in one sitting. I've done it. In order to change that behavior, you really got to change your attitude first. And sometimes they go hand in hand. Sometimes changing the behavior over time, your attitude changes too. But they can really go hand in hand to be more successful. So when I'm working with people to declutter their spaces, we're really working to refocus them on what is important and to change their minds about the value of those unhealthy behaviors. To see shopping actually as a boring, draining, unappealing activity. To see an attic full or even a kitchen crammed full of stuff as a negative thing, as a burden, rather than as something that is positive just because our consumerist society tells us that we're lucky and we should have everything stuffed to the rafters. So when you declutter your space, your mind becomes clearer too. And that's true with a lot of the things we do. That's a direct example of that changing the attitude and the behavior at the same time. And so you find yourself making all sorts of healthy changes. So let me give you some examples. I've worked with clients of all different backgrounds. I've worked with very small children, as young as like 3, 4, 5 years old. And I've worked with seniors and people who are retiring and downsizing, people in their 80s and even 90s, and I've worked with everybody in between. I've worked with men, women, singles, families. I've worked with people who have giant homes with all the storage space in the world, and I've worked with people who live in tiny apartments, like I'm expecting to move into in a few weeks. And the thing is that so many of them, no matter what their life experience, no matter what their needs, no matter what their personal situation is, so many of them have made changes in their spaces and at the same time made some really major changes in their lives. So let's first talk about my clients who made healthy changes to their diet and exercise first, because that's what we're talking about as part of Team Lean. I'll talk about one woman. I'm going to call her Jessica. That's not her name. When I started working with her, she has a one-bedroom apartment, and it was stocked, I mean, you know, wall to wall. Not the hoarder that you're thinking of, but definitely hoarding tendencies, right? She had bags from every conference she had ever attended, filled with the papers and the presentations and the free pens and the badges and all the travel documents from everyone from years. She was a government worker, so you can imagine how many conferences she attended. She had all those bags. And then she had shopping bags, mostly from Target, you know, not usually from, you know, expensive things, but so many shopping bags filled with things that she had just picked up killing time on Saturday, like socks. She had a lot of just like the white tube socks because they were on sale at Target. And she thought, well, they're on sale, I could always use white socks, so she'd buy a whole bag of them. She'd never take them out of the bag. She'd never, you know, unhook the little thing that keeps them together and wash them or put them in her drawer or use them. It was just obviously a behavior that was done unconsciously and without really thinking, oh, this is really something that's valuable to me and to my life. And it was something that we eventually discovered she was doing to avoid other behaviors that she knew she should be engaging in. So what were those behaviors? Jessica had unmanaged diabetes, she was overweight, and she knew from her doctors that she was supposed to be changing her diet, eating smaller portions, eliminating McDonald's and sodas from her diet, which was a regular part of her lifestyle, exercising, and also getting out and doing other things in order to support that lifestyle. So she had friends from her sorority, but they all lived all over the country. They weren't local to her. And so on her weekends, she found herself feeling alone, feeling intimidated about going out and trying to meet new people, or, you know, maybe trying to meet a guy, which she would have liked to have done, but that was a little scary. And certainly intimidated or maybe a little bit anxious or lazy, as we all get, about going out to exercise. She had the gym membership, didn't necessarily show up at the gym. So her Saturday shopping activity was really an avoidance behavior. And as we went through her house, and she worked very slowly. Some people, once they get started, they're really fast. I love to work really fast because I love fast results. But Jessica really wanted to work slowly and methodically because she said, you know, I think a lot of my emotional stuff right now is that I've lost my best friend. I did have a very close, you know, friend from my sorority who lived locally, and we spent all of our time together. We worked at the same place, and we had dinner together, and we hung out on the weekends, and she was the person who was closest to me, and she died of cancer about a year ago, and I've lost, you know, sort of like my family. She had family in other places, but that was her go-to person. That was her kind of her partner in life, and that person was gone. And so a lot of what came out as we were going through these bags and going through all of her stuff, and we'd find old pictures of her friend and things that reminded her of the activities she used to do with her friend, she started saying, I think I've not really processed this death really well. I think I'm still grieving. I haven't moved on. And for her, the decluttering process, her physical space, just getting rid of those socks, donating those socks to somebody else who could use them, and letting go of all those old conference badges, for her meant taking back control of her decision making and remembering her priorities. Because what she started realizing is, if my friend came back and saw what I was doing now, which is going to McDonald's after work and eating by myself, and then on Saturdays trolling Target just to kill time and avoid what I should be doing, she'd be really disappointed. And she'd feel bad, and she wouldn't be happy for me. And so that process meant for her that she did change her diet. Part of that was that we cleaned out her kitchen, and we made changes to her plate sizes and how she stored things, and we put the healthy options out front instead of putting the hidden box of cookies was hidden instead of right there out on the stove, ready to tempt. And so she got control of her diabetes, she lost weight, she actually started going to the gym. She actually ended up changing jobs because she felt like she was a little stagnant there, and in her new position at work, started making new friends. And so for her, this process was really a life changer. And it's not because she got rid of her socks. Certainly it helped for her to come home at the end of the day and have a nice space where she could come and just relax and not have a million things screaming at her, pay attention to me, you have to deal with me, why am I here? She just could come home at the end of the day and sit down on her couch and read a book or watch television or make herself a nice meal, or call somebody and invite them over because she had a place for them to sit and wasn't embarrassed by her home. Certainly that helped. But the bottom line is that the time that we spent together was time that we spent remembering her priorities and refocusing her on them and changing the attitude that she had toward shopping and all of these automatic behaviors that she was taking part in. So that's probably my best client example in terms of a major health change. But I've worked with many other clients who changed aspects of their lives that you wouldn't think would have a lot to do with decluttering their space. I've had other people who kind of came to a realization that they weren't happy with their careers and decided to change either jobs or really take a new direction or go out on their own. I've had people who, like the woman I mentioned earlier whose friend was calling her at 7 a.m., realized that the friends that were surrounding them were actually not people they enjoyed or not people that built them up or made them feel good or were there for them in any sort of real way, and decided, I'm going to let go of those people and seek out people who will add to my life, will enrich it instead of drain it. I've had people who, certainly couples and families that I've worked with, who reestablished connections and refocus on quality time together, whereas before they were so distracted by managing their stuff, by just cleaning it, moving it, storing it, maintaining it, buying it, moving it from place to place. And so they were able to enrich their relationships. And those are just a few examples. Decluttering, when it's done correctly, really gets you immediate results. So it's actually the best. When we want to lose weight, if we eat one healthy meal or go exercise one time, we feel good about ourselves, but we don't really look in the mirror and go, wow, that was good, right? We don't get that immediate gratification. When we declutter our spaces, we actually do. Even just decluttering in one room or one space and letting go of something, you get the immediate result. You see that empty space. You see visually the pile or the volume of stuff that you're getting rid of, and you can, if it's something that's donatable, you can take that somewhere and see that it's going somewhere else where somebody else can use it. You can see the amount that you're going to write off on your taxes for having donated that. And so really, decluttering is, if you're looking for that motivation, if you're looking to make a change in your lifestyle, especially if it's one that you're trying to do for your health benefits, this might be one way to go at it. Just like I mentioned before, there are many different ways, right? And sometimes, it's people who are trying to approach it from therapy or meditation or, other kind of lifestyle things. Decluttering is one way to start making those changes, because the stuff that surrounds us really tells us a story about ourselves. And we all have personal narratives. We all have sort of the story that we tell ourselves about who we are and why and how we got here and where we would like to go. But when we actually start looking through our drawers and looking through our closets and really looking at our space with fresh eyes, we either find that that story is reinforced, or we start going, you know what? Maybe I'm not who I think I am. Maybe who I want to be is really not how I'm behaving. So if you start looking around and you're seeing things like socks you don't use, and like photographs you don't look at, or like one of my clients who her bedroom was very messy. She's a single mother, and at the end of every day, she worked, she volunteered to run a nonprofit organization, and she had this daughter, and at the end of the day, she would come home and walk into her bedroom, which is supposed to be her private sanctuary, right? Like our little tiny patch of land where we have control. And it was messy and disorganized, and she'd never bothered to paint, and she said, it's not very inspiring. And in the corner of her room on the floor were 2 huge stacks of textbooks. And these were from several years before she had her daughter, when she had started going to grad school for a degree. And then she got pregnant and she decided, I want to have this baby, and she quit grad school and said, I'm going to go back. When my daughter's, 15, 16, I'll go back. Well, she still had those books sitting in the corner of her room. So when you look around your house and you see something like that, which can only make you feel guilty, regretful, uninspired, right? How healthy is that for her to look at that every day? Rather than focusing on the fact that she has a beautiful daughter who's now like 12 years old, and she has this great job and she's living the life that she chose for herself, rather than focusing on that, she has to remind herself every day of this incompleted task that is still awaiting her. And really, when she goes back to grad school, do you think they're going to be using those same textbooks? That does not make the textbook companies any money, right? So when you look around and you start seeing the unused socks and the textbooks and the things that don't support you in your life right now, you might learn that that personal narrative that you're telling yourself is great, but it's not what you're actually living. And if you're going to be who you want to be and live the life that you want to be, and if you want to be healthy in the way that you want to be healthy, then a good place to start is your surroundings, is controlling the space that you have control over, which is, relative to the universe, not very much, right? Once we leave our front door, we don't have a whole lot of control about what's out there, what's happened to us, but we have that little bit of square footage that's ours. And so this might be a great place to start, especially since the minute you start, even with the smallest change or the little bit of decluttering you can do, that little bit of purging or reorganizing, you see the result right away. So unlike the weight loss, which is going to take a while to come, unlike the muscles forming, unlike that feeling of having more energy and feeling good, that's going to take a little while to develop. The results do come. The decluttering can give you that motivation because you see it right away, which is one of the reasons why I love my job. In a single day, I spent all day yesterday with a guy in his apartment, walked in, didn't have any furniture, he just moved in, but all of his stuff was just everywhere. So there's no dresser, there's no sofa, there's like a mattress on the floor. So just piles of stuff, just clothing strewn around, and you can imagine when there's no furniture what a bunch of unpacked boxes looks like. That's what his apartment looked like when I showed up yesterday at 10 a.m. And when I left at 2 p.m., I'm going back Saturday to finish. When I left at 2 p.m., it was completely different. He looked around and he went, I can't believe it already looks this much better. I can't believe it. And in his case, it was getting rid of mostly empty boxes. It wasn't even that he had been shopping so much for things or that he had a lot of stuff that he was keeping. Other than that, he just doesn't throw out packaging. And so even that small change of just going through and pulling out the empty shoe boxes and the empty electronics boxes and all the bags that, things come in, of just letting go of that already made a huge difference in his space. So I think that's going to be really motivating for him. And I hope on Saturday when I go back and I leave at the end of that day and his apartment looks like an apartment and he can now buy furniture, that he will have felt like that was a really worthwhile investment and will be motivated to make other changes. Unsurprisingly, talking to him yesterday, I found out that he's also going through some personal changes. He's going through a divorce and he's separating from the military where he spent his career. So you find that it isn't about the stuff, it isn't about the food, it's not about the gym shoes, right? It's really about how we feel about ourselves, how we feel about our lives, what we're going through. And when we can identify the emotional things that we're going through, when we can work through them honestly with ourselves, then we can start to overcome them. Letting go. So I'm going to give you a little practical advice for this. I'm not going to teach you how to declutter today. It's not rocket science, first of all. And I know that the focus here is not necessarily on decluttering the stuff in our lives, but decluttering the other things. But I've put up a short list of questions to ask yourself when you're finding that you have a hard time of letting go of something. Now, this applies to an object, certainly, but it can also apply to those negative behaviors that we talked about before. The shopping, watching too much Netflix at once, the avoiding going to the gym, the binge eating or the overeating or the poor eating habits that we have. These are some of the things that we can ask ourselves, if we answer honestly, to help get us back on track and focus on the right priorities. So one is, what emotions arise when I think about letting go? So for that client, Jessica, who had lost her friend, I asked her, Jessica, what if this Saturday you absolutely did not go to Target? You said, if I do nothing else, I am just going to avoid Target all day. How does that make you feel? What is your gut reaction to that? And her response, I'm not quoting word for word, but her response was basically, I don't know what I would do with myself. I would probably stay home all day feeling like I should be doing some work. I should be calling a friend. I should be going out and trying to find some friends. I should be exercising. I should be doing all of these things. But I don't know if I'd actually do them. And so I anticipate actually spending all day in my pajamas just feeling bad about myself and going to bed feeling like I hadn't accomplished anything. So until Jessica could actually clarify that that's what Target gave to her, it gave her an excuse, it gave her an activity to avoid feeling that, she was never going to overcome the Target addiction. That was the first step. How would you be a different person if you changed your outlook or your behavior? So this is kind of going back to that idea of, who do you feel that you are? What's your personal narrative? How do you perceive yourself and how do you want others to perceive you? If that changed, for instance, if, right now I live in a 4-bedroom house and, it's on the hill and it's charming and southern and lovely and beautiful and we can host guests and have dinner parties and have Thanksgiving at our house on my grandmother's china. When that changes, when I get rid of every stick of furniture I own and most everything else too, and we move into a 1-bedroom in the city, and I can't really be that kind of a hostess. I mean, I'm hoping to have a comfy couch, but I can't be that kind of a hostess, and people will perceive me differently. How does that make me feel? I'm actually really excited about it, and I'm okay with that, but changes like that can really throw us off. And so that's a question to ask when it's, what if I change my eating habits? What if I lose a lot of weight? What if I look a lot different in the future than, what people are used to me looking like now? What if on Saturdays I don't go and do my usual, poker game with my friends because I'm eating a healthy dinner with my family, or I've signed up for a specific class at the gym. How does that change my perception of myself, and am I worried about that, and am I worried about the way that other people will perceive me when I make that change? What do I have to gain from letting go? I mentioned that, and all I want to say again is that when you let go of something that's not helping you, you are gaining something. If I'm letting go of even an expensive computer that's taking up space in my life that I don't know how to use, if I donate that and write it off on my taxes, that is not a loss for me. I am not losing anything. I am gaining back the space that I needed on my desk in my tiny apartment. What am I afraid of? And I think that taps into just about everything. When I was writing my book last year, I think I was definitely afraid of failing. Like, what if I write this book and then nobody reads it or nobody likes it? Or, what if I write it and then I publish it and then I read it and I go, I could have done better. And so those were the sorts of thoughts, the fears that went through my head that kept me from sitting down and writing, or then after I was done, kept me from actually figuring out how to publish it. But I was also afraid of the success. I would also sit there and go, well, what if it's like this major hit and I have to go on the radio, and then what if I just say the wrong thing and embarrass myself, and then I've humiliated myself on a world stage? Probably not a problem that I have to worry about, but I did worry about that. So it's important to identify what your fears are before you can make the changes. You got to overcome those fears, or at least just face them and push through them in order to make the changes that you're trying to make. And finally, what am I avoiding by engaging in those automatic decisions? Which, I think Jessica and the Target shopping is the perfect example of that. They were all these good, healthy behaviors that she knew she should be doing to be healthier and happier, but was finding socks at Target in order to avoid doing them. And she was just letting that automatic decision making happen instead of taking control of her decision making and saying, you know what? Even if I decide to go to Target today and buy socks, I'm going to do it because I have chosen to ignore my diet and chosen not to exercise, and I'm going to go to Target and buy those socks. I'm not going to let it happen automatically. Does anybody have any questions or even comments? Do you have maybe a personal story of your own relating to clutter or about personal change? I have so many clients, as I said, that have gone through major life changes with me, and they tend to call me because something is changing in their life, and it's not always a negative thing. Although I mentioned Jessica had lost her friend. I worked with a woman who was in a similar situation several years ago, who had lost her mother, and she was, she was in her 50s. Her mother was in her 80s when she died, so it wasn't like a sudden, unexpected loss. But she was feeling like an orphan and feeling alone in the world, and questioning what she had done with her life and wondering, would my mother be happy with it? And I'm going to call her Deborah. Deborah had also some health issues. She could have afforded to lose some weight and knew her doctor was always saying, you're eating all right, but you really need to add exercise into your routine. But she was a workaholic. She was like at work hours and hours every day, and would come home late, and wasn't really fitting that into her life. And she would really have liked to meet somebody. She really wanted to date. But her apartment was so overrun and so messy that she said, I can't even accept a date, because at some point he's going to want to see where I live, and I'm too embarrassed. I can't have him over. And the other issue that she was having was that she wasn't handling her paper. Her mail would come in, and she didn't know what to do with it, and it was just overwhelming. She didn't have a lot of time, so she felt completely out of control of her finances. And she remembered, she said, my mother was always very independent, and she was very smart about money, and she saved, and she always knew exactly where my parents' money was, and she made sure that they had retirement funding. And she'd be really upset with me if she realized, not only do I not know how much is in my 401k, I can't even find my account number. Like, I don't even know how to get to my 401k. And it's because she had just been automatic thinking her way through her paperwork. Well, deal with it tomorrow, I'll deal with it, figure it out later. And so for her, the decluttering process meant not only letting go of things that weren't useful to her, but finding the things that were actually really important that were buried under all the other stuff. I mean, just going through bins and bins of paper that had collected from work and from the mail and who knows what else over the last couple of years, just trying to find her passport, her social security card, her 401k account information, all of those things, and making sure that she understood where her money was and how she was saving for her own retirement, empowered her to take control of not only her exercise, which she later made time for and made a priority, but even her financial planning and the security of her future. So I'll conclude by just reminding you that there's a million ways to be happier and healthier and more productive. It doesn't have to be this way. But I'd encourage you to maybe go home tonight and look around your house and ask yourself first, if I were a stranger and I came here, what would this house tell me about the person who lived in it? And does that story match up with my personal story? Does it match up with how I would like to be perceived? Do my priorities show in my house? Can you tell that my family and my job and my dog and my health are the most important things to me? Or would a stranger coming through here think that tennis and laundry and yard work are most important to me? And if those don't align, consider using the organizing or decluttering process as a method of a greater happiness. There's no inherent benefit or value to having an organized house or to not having this extra stuff. Don't do it because it looks good on Pinterest or Facebook. Don't do it because the magazines tell you to do it. Those things don't matter. But do it if it means that you can refocus on your priorities, and do it if it can be one of those things that gets you immediate results so that you can move forward with that immediate gratification and start taking on other challenges in your life. Because sometimes just a little bit of a reward to get us started is very motivating when we're trying to make big personal change. Thanks so much for having me.